Gender Equality for Women by Jasmine Martinez. Overview, Gender Oppression. What is my topic? Gender Equality for Women. What it means and why it matters. The rules of society control the access that women have to education, work, and freedom of rights through culture, political, and social forms that support social oppression. These rules are what dictate how a woman engages in society, work, and education. The United States gender oppression occurs in work, education, and social life. Across different countries, they have restrictions like education, physical movement, and even fundamental rights. There is four sources that I will show in this video as an explanation of the way these norms influence women's lives and how they have built up gender oppression. Thesis. The rules of society formed through cultural, political, and social norms support social oppression by controlling the access women have to education, work, and freedom of rights globally. For my first source, it is Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women by Sophia Labate. The article discusses how gender equality is both men and women having equal access to education, funds, and political choices. Without this same access, equality does not exist. The author argues that empowerment is not just economic. Empowerment is about women being able to make choices, having power over themselves, and having their voices heard. To most, the Western gender ideas doesn't always make sense, so communities may resist, change, or reinterpret them as their own. I have this quote from the article. It is, Western considerations of male and female seem to have been adopted, even though the projects were implemented in territories which all had very different family and gender structures. Gender inequality is incorporated into social structures, financial systems, and even the government. Men are usually given favoritism, causing limited finances, education, and even choices. Women are unappreciated. They depend on men and have limited opportunities, making it difficult to obtain equal rights as men. The article discusses how there is developmental programs, but they reinforce these rules rather than opposing them, which stops any real progress from happening. For my second source, I have Gender Inequality by Ziauddin Sardar, Jordi Sarah, and Scott Jordan. The article discusses how in Muslim countries, gender inequality is formed by the rules of society, religion, and cultural beliefs. Women typically face barriers of discrimination in education, the ability to travel independently, or freedom of movement. The authors discuss that women in many Muslim societies face difficulties in education, work, and freedom because of their culture, religion, and political systems that give men this authority over women's lives. Women are typically expected to do certain obligations, like following religious practices, which explains the limits part. There is certain scriptures that limit women's opportunities of education and even the right to assume leadership positions. These opportunities are further restricted due to peer pressure of them to get into early marriage. I'm talking about young girls here. Men dominate most social and economic roles and positions of authority in the family. This causes them to make the decisions and have power over economic resources. As every generation typically passes by, we see that these practices are repeatedly, and they serve to define women's social and economic roles. Therefore, women typically lack independence and opportunities to realize their full potential. For my third source, I have Gender Discrimination Comes in Many Forms for Today's Working Women by Kim Parker and Carrie Funk. The article states that women face discrimination at work, being underpaid while working in the same occupation as a man. Women are typically overlooked or given fewer support, affecting the opportunities they obtain. The article discusses that Black women have a higher rate of discrimination compared to those that are white or Hispanic women. According to the Pew Research Center, women are roughly 4 times as likely as men to say that they have been treated as if they were not competent because of their gender. The Pew Research Center article discusses that gender discrimination continues to be a challenge today for working women in the United States. They report that women are facing discrimination by earning less pay than a man, being given less support from their senior leaders, and even being treated as if they were less competent in their workplace. Unfortunately, some of these stereotypes that they gain or lose, some of the opportunities that they gain or lose are because of the stereotypes. The article then goes on to explain that although women who have a higher degree report even more discrimination and lack of support to help attain higher positions. For my fourth source, I have Afghanistan. Taliban rule has erased women from public life, sparked mental health crisis by Diane Penn. Women's rights should be viewed as fundamental rights. The article discusses that although there is policies and agreements to protect women's rights, multiple countries continue to disregard them. Women's rights were stripped away, removing them from school, work, and public places. The restrictions have caused a mental health crisis among women. In the article, Ms. Davidan states, 3 years ago, an Afghan woman could technically decide to run for president. Now, she may not even be able to decide when to go and buy groceries. I feel like this is such a strong citation. I would definitely like to involve it into my research paper and do more research on the Taliban. The United Nations article summarizes the global standing of human rights. Women's rights should always be viewed as fundamental rights. However, women continue to face discrimination in education, financial opportunities, and even political involvement. Although there is agreements and policies to protect women's rights, many countries continue to neglect them. The article then goes on to explain that limited access to resources, unequal pay, and women's rights violation because of social norms and cultural prioritize to men. So, what is the connection? All of my sources connect by showing that numerous systems combine to reinforce gender inequality. The scholarly sources explain how social norms, cultural beliefs, and political systems withhold women's opportunities. The United Nations article offers a global perspective and reveals that the obstacles that women encounter throughout the world regarding their rights of equality, education, and personal safety. The Pew Research Center article provides present evidence of discrimination in the workplace and unequal pay women are facing in the United States today. Altogether, these sources reveal that laws, culture, and everyday encounters of gender inequality across the world and transformation occurs by beginning to address gender inequality. These sources are strong and reliable evidence because they provide accurate information. Although some sources were published years ago and others more recently, they all display how gender inequality remains a common issue. In some ways, it seems that gender equality has moved backwards. For my paper, I want to continue to research how women's rights in Afghanistan have been stripped away since the Taliban returned to power. I also want to be able to include more information from other countries and see what women's rights look like there. Not just Muslim, not just in the US, but globally. Meta reflection journal response goals. I did not complete this assignment, but in my discussion board when I first joined the class, I said that I was a procrastinator. And as a procrastinator, my goal for this course was to improve my writing skills. I really do personally feel like I've made progress. I feel like just being able to sit down, arrange my thoughts, and really express my ideas, especially that something that affects me so deeply as a woman myself, even though sometimes I feel like my growth seems small, I feel like I have learned to express myself a lot better. I typically use bullet points to come up with my ideas, and sometimes I feel like it takes me hours to do just come up with one bullet point, make a paragraph out of one bullet point. So I feel like the fact that I've been thinking so much and forming this Google slide presentation or my task one has really made it easier for me to arrange my thoughts and being able to express myself. I chose gender equality for women because I am able to connect to this topic personally, especially with what I am writing, and it has helped me view situations differently. For example, what is going on in Afghanistan is a current event, not a past one, and it's right in our eyes. It's something that is not talked about enough, which is why I want to keep exploring what other countries are going through and see what I can come up with for my research as well. Thank you so much.